Welcome everyone to our virtual town hall. We started a series of these this week for various audiences, and we're thrilled that you chose to join us today. I'm Renee Kapkowski, Vice President of Institute Communications here at Georgia Tech. We're hosting these town halls on Microsoft Teams platform because it allows us to host as many people as we possibly can at one time. We have found that it helps if you do not join us using a VPN. So if you're on your VPN, you could log off. That will help you have better audio and less lag time. We'll keep an eye on technology. It's been working pretty well so far, and we hope it will continue to do that. But there is a chat function and a Q&A function here. So just raise a flag there if you have any issues that are not individual to you. We're hosting these town halls because we recognize this is a very uncertain time, and we just want to have as much open communication as we can and answer as many questions as possible for all of you in as many different formats as possible. After we finish today, the recording takes about a day to process, but we will post recordings, and we will also post questions and answers on our Georgia Tech COVID-19 site in the FAQ section. So you'll be able to find things there. If we don't get to all your questions today, hopefully you'll be able to find your answers there in the next day or so. So with that, I'd like to welcome our guest today. We have President Angel Cabrera as our host, John Stein, Dean of Students, and Dr. Rafael Bras, the Provost and EVP of Academic Affairs. With that, I'll turn it over to President Cabrera.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to spend a little bit of your afternoon with us and catch up with what's going on at Georgia Tech. Let me start by sending my thoughts to all of you who are personally dealing with the effects of this disease of COVID-19. It is a serious health situation, and I think as much as we keep talking about it, it's important to remind everybody that this is really serious. I mean, yesterday we had another record number of deaths in the U.S. The official count is already 33,000 and growing. More than 580 people have died in Georgia. Some of them very close to the Georgia Tech community, and it is a reminder that this is a serious issue, and that we all need to be working to make sure that we minimize the risk, not just for ourselves, but for everybody around us. And my thoughts to all of you who may be dealing with this disease at home or with your extended family or friends. And once again, the things that we've heard a million times, and we need to keep repeating and reminding ourselves that we need to do: try to stay at home, try to keep away from other folks. Extreme your practice of washing your hands and taking other precautions, maintain a distance with other people when we're outside, and if you have to be in proximity with others for professional reasons or for other reasons, just make sure we protect ourselves, that we all wear masks, and we maintain keep all the precautions. I know we've heard that a million times, but I think every opportunity we have, let's keep reminding ourselves this is really a serious situation. In fact, it's perhaps one of the most complex situations many of us have experienced during our lifetimes, and I appreciate very, very much all you have done, all of our students have done, as we adapted to this really new situation for all of us. When this disease reached our community, and it became clear that it was putting our population, our community at risk, and that we had to make some really unprecedented decisions. Top of mind was from the very beginning the safety and health of our community, and that's why very early on during the first couple of weeks of March, we made the decision that we had to limit the number of people on our campus. We had to ask you to leave our campus, those of you who live on campus, and I know that was extremely stressful, and and sad really for us for all of our students who were already planning, some of you in your last semesters on campus to have to without notice have to pack up and leave your rooms. And I want to thank you for all you did to evacuate our campus within just 2 weeks of time and without prior notice. Just to put it in perspective, we went from a little under 9,000 students who live on campus to barely 600 who remain on campus. Of course, there are some people who simply could not go anywhere. I mean, people who, whether due to travel restrictions or other circumstances, but we had to make sure that that number of students who remained on campus stayed as small as possible. And then each of us who moved out of campus, again, that was not only good and the right thing to do from the standpoint of your own health, but at the same time, you were minimizing the risk of those who had to stay on campus. We, even during that time, as many of you know, we had to be very careful. That's why we gave tickets for specific times to make sure that we didn't have congregations of families and students who were packing up and moving out from the same dorm, the same floors at the same time. Everything had to be planned, and I know that caused additional stress to many of you. So I just want to say thank you, and I really appreciate the collaboration of everybody. I want to thank also all the staff in student services and facilities and our police for all the work they did during that transition and that they continue to do right now. I mean, the students who remain on campus, they still need to eat and have access to basic resources. We have changed the way all the food services work. You're no longer able to go to the cafeteria. You have to pick the food in certain locations and eat separately. But again, the strategy here to try to keep the risk of the infection low is to minimize the number of people who are on campus at any given time, and within that, try to keep distance as much as possible. My appreciation goes, as I said, to all the folks on campus who continue to be there to try to keep the basic services on our campus going, including very especially our police department. You may have followed some stories about how we currently have a testing site on campus. It's a partnership with CVS. I was very proud that the current chairman of CVS is a Georgia Tech alum, and in partnership with them, there is now a drive-through testing site that allows almost 1,000 tests every day. And this abundance of easy testing. This in our case, when someone drives through to be tested within minutes, they get a result. This is an essential piece of the puzzle of how we deal with this public health situation. So, of course, just like our absolute number one priority has been and continues to be to try to take care of the health and safety of our community, our second priority is our students, is to make sure that we don't hurt academic progression, that the learning continues, that your progression towards your degree continues. And that I have to express my appreciation to your faculty for what they've done, and very especially to each of you for what you've done. To, again, without notice, with just a 2-week transition time, to take all of our instruction online, it's absolutely incredible. It's unbelievable. I mean, if anybody had told me just 3 months ago that we would have to do that, and if anyone had asked me whether it would be possible for Georgia Tech to overnight, within just 2 weeks, to transition the entire 100% of our instruction online, I would have said impossible. It would take years of preparation, and yet, when the need was there, everybody stepped up and we all did it together. So I appreciate what everybody did. I think it was an incredible example of flexibility, of innovation, of conscientiousness, of collaboration, of compassion, of understanding of how difficult the situation was for everybody. And now, for the first time in our history, 100% of our teaching and our learning is taking place online or from a distance, using all sorts of technologies, as you know. Obviously, there necessary there are and there will continue to be some glitches. I know there's some classes that are working incredibly well, others that not so much. Keep the feedback coming. Keep sending us your messages. Keep working with your faculty. Also, your faculty are very open and very appreciative of the feedback that you give. And for many of them, is the first time that they have had to teach online, and they're also learning just like you are. I know there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of controversy, and some of you have been upset, and you have expressed your views about the fact that that we have not switched our grading system to pass-fail. I'm fully aware that universities around the country chose to do that, chose to switch to pass-fail, and clearly they're very strong and good arguments for that. And given especially the difficulties that many students are facing when they go home, and they may be in different time zones, or they may be facing different family circumstances at home. I just want to tell you that even though the university system of Georgia decided not to do that, and they decided not to do that for a number of reasons. As you know, we are part of the university system. On some issues, the system authorizes the different universities to make whatever decision is better suited to them. In some other issues, the system decides to make a decision and to set policy for the whole system. And in this was the case in the pass-fail discussion. Because of a number of reasons. One is some limitations that some of our sister institutions had in implementing this, even if we had wanted to, but also there are very complex connections with the Hope Scholarship, which most of our in-state students enjoy, and that requires a certain GPA. For a whole number of reasons, the system decided that the policy for all 26 institutions was going to be to not switch to pass-fail. And as part of the system, of course, we accept that and we operate within that policy. Having said that, what the provost has done and the deans and the department chairs is to work with the faculty to make sure that everybody understands that these are very unusual circumstances, and that we have to be flexible, we have to be compassionate, we have to understand that different students deal with different issues during this transition. And I am convinced and I'm confident that all of that will be reflected in sort of reasonable and compassionate and understanding practices during the course and during grading and so on. So again, that's been a top of mind. If I know there might be some other questions about sort of online teaching, the provost also will be happy to address them. But so beyond that, our third priority has been during this transition is around research. Of course, we are a top research university. Our faculty, as you know, are well respected, and they're leaders in their fields, and a big part of their time is spent advancing their own fields. It's been also very hard. It's been complicated. A lot of our research has also moved to a distance setting, and a lot of our researchers are teleworking, just like the rest of us. Still, most of the labs on campus we have shut down to avoid the concentration of people on our campus. There's still some basic services, some animals that have to be fed, and some equipments that have to be maintained. And also, there are some areas of research that have a direct connection with our ability to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, and so there's still some presence in some areas. What I have to tell you is I've been absolutely incredibly proud and inspired by how quickly many of our faculty have jumped in and taken their expertise and their backgrounds to find new solutions that will help us deal with the pandemic. You may have seen stories in the media from professors in biomedical engineering and mechanical engineering getting together to design new forms of personal protective equipment that has been, as you know, in very short supply in hospitals in the state and throughout the nation. And they've been able to produce prototypes, take them to the hospitals, test them, refine the designs. They've been producing, for example, thousands already of face shields. but at the same time take those designs and provide them in an open source way to manufacturers in the state that now are taking production from a few thousand a week to hundreds of thousands, and they're now supplying the needs of hospitals not only in Georgia but across the nation. And it's been just terrific to see from all the labs and all the research groups on campus to pulling in their PPE and donating it to the front lines across the state, to just designing solutions in information technology, in testing, in lots of areas that really are making a difference. Modeling, trying to understand how the pandemic is going. So beyond what has happened to just keep the machinery of Georgia Tech going, which has been absolutely remarkable, I think we all should be very, very proud of the work that our faculty and our graduate students and alumni and others have done to really make a contribution. We're now pivoting to thinking about what happens next, and trying to figure out at what point and what conditions can we go back to normal or to a new normal. And the reality is we have to be humble in how we face the future, because we don't know. I mean, as much as researchers are really making great progress in understanding this disease and understanding the patterns of spread, we still don't know what's going to happen. We don't know, is there going to be a wave or going to be multiple waves? Is the wave going to disappear in the summer or not? Is it coming back? We don't know. And yet, what we're trying to do is look at various scenarios, sort of what if scenarios that are sort of based on our best understanding of the disease, and trying to be prepared for them while staying flexible and making sure that whatever we do, we keep the safety and the health of our community as our top concern. We've already made some decisions, as you know. This summer, we decided to move all instruction online, to cancel study abroad programs. Given the information that we had at the time, that was really the only feasible scenario. So all the classes this summer will be taught online. You also know we communicated we had to make the very tough but absolutely necessary decision to cancel commencement. There was no way that, given what we knew at the time, that we would be in a position to fill an arena and to celebrate. And it was a heartbreaking decision, because I know how important that moment is, not just for our students, but for families. I mean, just less than a year ago, I was in McCamish celebrating the graduation of my own son, and I know how moving that was, and it just it was a tough and sad decision for us, but it was the right decision to do. However, here's what we're trying to do, because no matter what happens, we absolutely are committed to celebrating, to honoring the accomplishment, the incredible accomplishments of our graduates. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to do something virtual on the day off, the day where we would have commencement. We're going to do something online, something that is fun, that is celebratory, that honors you, but also something that allows you maybe to even share on social media, share with others. You'll get a little bit more details later about that, and there might be some fun features and how we do that. I very much look forward to that. But we're not giving up on an actual commencement, and what we hope is that later in the year we'll be able to bring you together, those of you who can come back to campus and have that commencement. Whether we do that at the end of the summer term, if the evolution of the pandemic allows, that'll be a great time to do it. If it weren't possible, then we may need to do it at the end of the fall. So we don't have a date yet, because, as I said, we're dealing with so much uncertainty. But what I want to tell you is that we are committed to having a commencement for the graduates of the class of 2020 to have their moment, which they've worked so hard to have. Our current plan is to return to class in the fall. That's what, given all the information we have, that's the goal we're working towards, and that applies to the entire university system of Georgia right now. That is the goal. Of course, as you know, we don't know what we don't know. Anything can happen, and we'll once again need to be flexible and open to the possibility that things may change. But right now, that's what we're doing. We'll use the summer, depending on how things evolve, while teaching happens online, we'll use the summer to see if some functions, some business functions, some research functions can come back to campus and to try to figure out what would be the right protocols where we can start coming back and work in a safe way back on campus, and hopefully that will inform also how we manage what happens in the fall. Again, and I appreciate very much what you have done during this transition, and I think some of the very things we've done that have been so incredibly helpful will continue to be helpful. To stay open and to stay flexible and patient, to stay compassionate with others, to remain collaborative and to have an open mind to innovating and to find new ways to get the job done. I think that has served us very well until now and will continue to serve as well. We're also we haven't forgotten about the very exciting strategic plan. So we're not only just planning for the next few months, but we're now beginning after we dealt with this rapid shift. We're now restarting the process to work on our strategic plan. And I want to thank some of you who have signed up and who are already plugged into some of the working groups, and a lot of very exciting work is happening. Let me talk a little bit also about the financial implications of the pandemic, and the financial implication, obviously, for many of you, for members of our community, but also for Georgia Tech. And it is, I think, important to realize that the impact that the pandemic is having in the American economy is going to be severe. I mean, we keep looking at unemployment data, which are pretty harsh. We're looking at potential impact in tax revenues as the economy. The economic activity lowers, so do tax collections, and of course that impacts the ability of the state to invest in our universities, and that's going to impact the financials of the school very immediately. As you know, when we as we moved away from campus, we made the decision to refund in a pro rata basis the fees for room and board and other fees of services that students are not enjoying. That is the right thing to do, but that of course creates a hit into the institute finances of over $20 million. If you add other areas around study abroad and executive education and athletic events and so on, we're probably going to be facing a hit in the university the institute finances of in the very immediate, in the next 2 months, of over $50 million, which during the summer can grow to twice or three times as much. So part of what we're working on the administration side is trying to figure out what is the best way to try to deal with that hit. But as we do that, what we're making sure is that our top priority is to ensure that we can, that at least we're not going to make our students, many of whom are already dealing with complex financial situations, worse, and that we're going to help as much as we can. So early on during the process, we set up a student emergency fund. Together with some money from the foundation, some new donations. Our alumni, it's been really, really neat to see our alumni step up and send us some donations. The Alumni Association has directed a roll call during this term entirely to this emergency fund. And Dean Stein and his staff, they've been working very diligently to process applications from students who are facing all sorts of unexpected expenses or reduced revenues, and try to use that fund to at least buffer students as much as possible and to help them as much as possible around that. We have some good news in the Federal CARES Act, the Economic Stimulus Act that was passed a couple of weeks ago in Congress. There were some amounts for higher education. They were distributed by school according to some formulas, and Georgia Tech is going to receive a little over $10 million. The first half of that, a little over $5 million, is coming very quickly. It could be in the next week or two. and that money will directly go to students in need. So in fact, it's all pass-through money. It doesn't, none of that money is going to be to help universities deal with their own financial issues. It's all passed through to the students. We're currently working with Dean Stein and the provost and others to make sure that we're prepared, so as soon as that money hits our accounts, that we're ready to respond to the requests from our students. So those of you who are facing specific issues related to the pandemic, could be some of you who already had financial need, or who you didn't have financial need, and now because of the impact of this, you may. Please know that there is already a fund that you can submit applications to, and that will be additional mechanisms, in part help with this federal money that is coming our way. And the other things that the university system has done to help our students financially is, yesterday, 2 days ago, like time flies, I think it was 2 days ago, the Board of Regents met and decided to freeze tuition for next year. And that applies to all programs, that applies to in-state and out-of-state. All tuition will be the same as this year. Again, from an administrative standpoint, that creates challenges on our financials because our costs go up, and of course, but it is entirely the right thing to do. I mean, and I think it says a lot about the Board of Regents' commitment to making sure that that we're responsive to the increased financial needs of families. The other decision that was made was to remove several fees during the summer term. So if you take summer classes, which, as I mentioned, will be online, lots of the traditional fees will not be charged, and only the technology fee and the special institutional fee. So anyway, that's sort of maybe a little bit of the idea of how we still don't know. Again, we don't have in terms of now of the impact on the institute finances. We'll know in the next few weeks once the state has a better assessment of the impact of this new economic reality and tax revenues, and how much money the state may need to cut, and how that's going to impact the institute. We'll figure that out. But with all of this, I'll tell you, and maybe this would be a good way to wrap this up, and then open it up to some of the questions you've been sending. But with all the complexity, the fact that we've dealt with a situation that is unusual and unprecedented to most of us, and all the changes that we've had to enact, and all the uncertainty that we're still facing about the future, I have really never been this confident and optimistic about the future as I am today. What I have seen, and the way our faculty, our colleagues, our staff, the administration has reacted, what I have seen our students do, and I've been in contact with also the leaders in student government, but also with several of the students that I've gotten to know since I arrived in September. Just the attitude of the can-do attitude, the attitude of innovation and flexibility, and just figuring out a way to get the job done. The sense of responsibility, the sense of community. I feel like we're in very good shape, and we're going to be able to deal with this and whatever comes our way in the next few months, and we're going to deal with it successfully, and we're going to deal with it together. And very importantly, I have a strong sense that not only we'll go through this situation, but in some ways we may come out from the other end stronger and better in some ways, and better able, I think, better aware of the importance of our mission and how important it is, what we do as an institution, and probably even more inclined to accepting different types of innovation, more open to different types of learning and of working, and more importantly, more aware of how important it is what we do. Anyway, I will close my remarks there, and perhaps Renee, as you have seen some of these questions come in, feel free to just direct the conversation in the best possible direction.
Will do. So we had some questions pre-submitted and you answered many of them. You talked a little bit about the plans for commencement. You talked about pass-fail. You talked about the fees for summer being removed. One of the questions still remaining on summer around finance is whether or not summer tuition will change since it's fully online and not just partially online. I know you mentioned the fees, but anything about tuition outside of the fall tuition freeze?
Right, and no, the change, the courses during the summer will have the same tuition level as the courses would have normally. In some universities within the system, there was a sort of an added tuition for online courses. We haven't had that. In fact, the other institutions are going to remove that. They were already phasing it out, and they're going to remove it. But in our case, the tuition will remain the same as it is for normal courses. The only thing is some of the fees that you would pay if you were on campus doing those courses in the more traditional way, of course, will not be charged.
Okay, and then on the Q&A, there is a question regarding low-income students having a more difficult time. While we've heard of many students struggling regardless of income when they go home with ill family members or more responsibilities while they're trying to do distance learning. The question is around why low-income students at Tech might have more disadvantages and what we might do to help them in that regard.
Well, first, I fully agree with the premise of the question, which is it is in a way when we're on campus, we all have access to very similar resources, and I think the differences between our backgrounds matter less. When we go back home, we face very different realities, and it is very different to be from middle or high income family and with a good internet connection and in a good situation at home where you can sort of close yourself in a room and focus and concentrate and study, or going back to a home that may not afford that kind of thing, or where you may not have the appropriate space or the appropriate Wi-Fi connection, or you may have unusual situations at home that you deal with, and that is the reality, and that's sort of one of the hard implications of this move of having to shut down our campus. And so I appreciate all of you who are dealing with those kinds of circumstances very much. And not only I appreciate it, but your faculty do as well. So one of the things I recommend is make sure that if you're having a hard time, that make sure your faculty know about that. We need to know, and your faculty may be able to accommodate some of your issues in some way or another. Sometimes it's just the impact maybe that you just went home and you work in a very different time zone. Again, make sure your faculty know about that, and there may be ways in which they can accommodate it and at least make it a little bit easier on you. But there might be also some issues that you're facing, as I mentioned earlier, that are financial in nature. There might be new expenses that you have that you're incurring, or issues that all of a sudden the financials of your family may have changed. As I said, there's some resources for you. Some of those resources are already in place through the Student Emergency Fund that we've created, and some additional resources are going to be coming in through this federal program. So just make sure you reach out to us, you reach out to Dean Stein, and share your issues. This may be a good opportunity, Renee, to ask Dean Stein to tell us a little bit about how that emergency fund has worked and how many students have applied and sort of how it has evolved. You might need to unmute yourself, John.
There we go.
There you go.
Technology. Yeah. Sorry. I'm happy to talk about the emergency fund, and students, if you're watching and you haven't applied, I encourage you, if you need the funds, to please search it out. You can find it on the Division of Student Life's webpage. It's an easy application. To date, just shy of 1,000 students have applied for emergency funding. We have funded over $500,000 to assist students with all kinds of needs. for travel needs, personal needs, medical needs, needs related to mental health. So really, I encourage you to take advantage of the fund. This fund was really through the generosity of the Institute, the president, through Alumni Association, the foundation, the parents program. We were able to, at this point, successfully fundraise over $600,000, and funds continue to come in, donations continue to come in. So I'm very proud of our alum and our families who have stepped up and really see the need to assist our students. We will also work with the CARES Act and continue the funding there. We'll have a little bit more flexibility. This current fund has a maximum of $1,000 that we're able to offer a student in need.
Thank you, John. Go ahead.
Unmuting. Just to clarify the last comment from John, the current fund, which has been sort of funded, as you've heard, through donations and internal resources, that does have a limit of $1,000. The new fund that we will create with the CARES Act may not have a limitation. Go ahead, Renee.
Thank you. So I encourage all of you to look into that on the Student Life webpage. And again, we will post that information on the COVID-19 webpage as well. Moving on to classes as we finish up the semester before we look ahead to more questions about summer or fall. Maybe for Dr. Bross this time, what options are there for students in classes where professors aren't listening to the administration in terms of being understanding? There's a midterm time length that's significantly reduced or significantly different than other classes. And there's concern that the professor may not be focused on the student's well-being.
Well, first of all, good afternoon, all of you. Let me say and begin by stating that we understand that all of us are going through a very difficult time. In the chat, I see that some of you, in fact, have been impacted with family members that are sick with the coronavirus. Needless to say, that is difficult to deal with. But let me also tell you that staff and faculty are being impacted in the same fashion. And hence, as we navigate these very difficult waters, I think it's important to understand that all the parties are operating in very unusual circumstances. We are very intent, and so is the great majority of the faculty. There are tens of thousands of contact hours of faculty with students. And I can tell you that for the great majority, the great majority of those students and faculty understand the limitations, but are doing quite well. There are exceptions to that. And we have been intent on letting our faculty know that people are clearly interested in making this different, that they have to be flexible, that they have to show empathy, that they have to understand that many of you are in situations, like the president stated earlier, that are not ideal, to take exams, to do homework, to be available. I repeat, most of those cases are responsive. You should, as the president said, always contact your faculty member first. There are other ways, though, if that doesn't work. Certainly, there's a question I noticed relative to surveys and CEOs. So we have provided for 3 different ways for faculty and us to get input on how the term is going. We have provided templates that over 700 faculty have downloaded, by the way, at this point, to ask questions midterm and things not midterm, but midway, to see how these are going. Many have used it, some have not. At the end of the term, you will have also an opportunity to provide information on how it goes. The other way is we have an Office of Conflict Resolution, and Dr. Kyla Ross receives all those concerns and try to find solutions and mediate the solutions. So it's kyla.ross@gatech.edu. And believe me, she works tirelessly to try to find the appropriate accommodation for you and for faculty, depending on what is being done. At the end of the game, I'm sure that some of you will be very happy with the outcome. Some of you may not be completely happy with the outcome. And I can say the same thing from the faculty perspective and from the staff perspective. I've seen it, I've lived it, and as we speak, it's happening. So I beg your patience. We will be responsive. You send a note to that effect, and if you have exploited that first contact with your faculty, that should always be first. We will help in everything we can.
Thank you, Dr. Bross. There are a few more questions out about the connection between not moving to pass-fail and the Hope Zell scholarship payouts. Is there anything more you could say about that, President Cabrera?
Well, not much in the sense that, I mean, the system has looked into this issue, and they have concluded that the implications of moving to a pass-fail in the case of the state are not as simple as there might be in other institutions who may have more degrees of freedom, because that connection to hope that affects many of our students, and they've explored the implications that it would take to change even the legal foundation of the Hope Scholarship would be very complicated. So that's basically one of the biggest factors of why the system has decided not to do. But from the standpoint of Georgia Tech, I mean, we have to accept we're part of the system. The system has made a decision, and we just have to accept that decision and act accordingly.
Can I say something? Let me add something to that. I noticed in one of the questions or comments that the issue of whether going pass-fail was not approved by the system office because it would increase the cost of the Hope Scholarship. I personally have no evidence that that was ever a factor in this. What it is a factor is the complications of the legislative framework, as the president stated, and the fact that there are many institutions, and some of you have pointed out, we are indeed all different, and we have made and feel that argument and feel that way, and the system respects that and knows that. You have to respect that from their perspective. They have to manage 300,000 students, not 24,000. And they have to be and provide as much consistency as possible to be fair to all. I know this is disappointing. I empathize with your disappointment. Believe us, we empathize with your disappointment.
Thank you, Dr. Bross. One more question about summer, and then we'll move on to fall. The question about summer is about fees and whether or not summer out-of-state tuition fees would be waived.
I guess the short answer is no. I mean, the same fee structure will apply during the summer and beyond. In-state students will pay in-state tuition. Out-of-state students will pay out-of-state tuition. Some of our graduate programs, especially in the professional programs that have specific tuition levels, those same tuition levels will stay the same. And as I mentioned earlier, the positive news is that there will be no change moving forward. So the increase over year on year will be zero.
Thank you. Looking ahead to fall, there's questions first and foremost about fall study abroad, as it takes a little bit more planning to study abroad in fall. Do we have a sense of when decisions about fall study abroad will be made?
Maybe, I don't know if the provost wants to take on this question, since he has yeah, go ahead.
Yes, let me try to answer that. We are struggling with that same question. Our intention, as the president stated earlier, is that fall programs on campus and out of campus will go back to normal, or at least begin a transition to normal. We are seeking to try to find when the decisions need to be made vis-a-vis study abroad, and that's probably sometime in the middle of the summer. Now, keep in mind that that decision is not only ours. As you go abroad, we have to abide by whatever regulations are in place in the countries that are being planned. And one comment that I want to make, which addresses some of the questions that I've also been reading, vis-a-vis opening in the fall and doing these things of things. This is a crisis of public health. The operating word is public. So it is not a question of whether I get sick or any one of us gets sick. Each of us have different risk patterns, and we have to consider that. This is a question about being responsible to the public at large and preventing hurting those that are more liable to suffer seriously, even die, by being careless in the way that we expose them. So I repeat, keep in mind that all these decisions are not about individuals, they are not about whether any one of you or any one of us is healthy. It's about keeping the public healthy.
Thank you. Looking ahead to fall, President Cabrera, you talked a little bit yesterday on the employee town hall about some of the precautions we will take as we return to campus and the focus of the task force on that front. Can you talk a little more about that here?
Yeah, so we are indeed working on looking at what the protocols would be to start returning safely to campus, and that encompasses a whole host of areas, anything from cleaning and disinfecting protocols, which will necessarily need to change. What is it we prioritize when we clean our campus? Issues around potentially limits on sizes of groups, and also protocols around protective gear and personal protective equipment worn by whether it's by members of the staff in specific functions, or even there would be changes in individual conduct and behavioral patterns that may need to change. So we're looking into all of that. We're also looking at cities and countries that are a little bit ahead of the curve, and trying to learn what may have been working better in those places. As I said, we're looking at different scenarios, different what-if scenarios, and then we have the summer term that hopefully will allow us to start experimenting and applying some of these protocols. I think right now what we are predicting is that it may not be a sort of an overnight flip the switch and just go back to the situation that it was, just 3 months ago, but it might be a series of changes that gradually allow us to return, if not fully to normal, to come as close as we can. Also, there will be protocols in terms of athletics, both for the student athletes and the practice, but also for public events. So the task force, we formed the task force very immediately under the leadership of our Senior Vice President and Chief of Staff, Frank Neville, and the representatives from all the different units in the Institute. And that task force is now again switching their attention to basically figuring out what those protocols will be to allow us to get back to campus safely.
Perfect. I think we have time for about 2 more questions. One is for Dean Stein. With classes online, at least through the summer, what ideas are being discussed to help students feel like they are part of the virtual Yellow Jacket community? And how can administration help address the mental health concerns of students who are now facing isolation and other stressors?
Sure. Well, I hope that students can see that even during this 5-week time that we've been in, we have done our very, very best to kind of maintain as much normalcy as possible. We have all kinds of virtual events going on and virtual programs and stuff, some coming out of health initiatives and Center for Student Engagement, and others coming out of different resource centers and stuff. So we will continue to do that throughout the summer. We will make sure that, we're meeting the needs of the students that are enrolled, and we will be gearing up for fall term. So, we're planning for both things coming back the way they were in the fall, or we're planning, if we had to go further, ways that we would still accommodate students. On the mental health side, I want to really, really impress upon students and families that we are fully engaged. All of our mental health professionals are still available to students at any point in the day or night. We still have a 24/7 emergency system if need be. Okay, our therapists are talking to students via telephone. They're doing telehealth. They're emailing students. GT Care is open, not physically open, but they're open. You can contact the staff there. A counselor will give you a call back and engage in a conversation and do an assessment on the phone. So I encourage you, if you need some help over the next 2 weeks as we move to the final weeks of the term, which are very, very stressful anyway, please reach out. And if you have a friend who needs help, please make sure you let us know that your friend needs help, and we will reach out. The Dean's office is still available. We're making contact with students, and students are making contact with us, and I do appreciate that. If you're really struggling in any way, just make sure that you reach out and let us know that.
Thank you, and I'll reinforce that what both Dean Stein has said and Dr. Bras has said. If you go to the Georgia Tech COVID-19 website, there are resources available and links to all those resources for you, as well as on the Student Services and Student Life websites. President Cabrera, as we get ready to wrap up, just one last question about what it looks like for research as we hope to ramp back up. Would that include undergraduate research? What will the phasing of that look like?
Yeah, so a lot of the research continues, and a lot of the research hasn't stopped. And in many of our disciplines, the work can be done thanks to technology, can be done online. And in several of our undergraduate students and definitely graduate students are still doing their work with their faculty, and papers are getting written, and data is being analyzed, and the work continues. Obviously, it's not the same for some disciplines that required specific laboratory access and laboratory equipment, and that's an area that, again, with the earlier discussion about our safety protocols, we're working on those to try to figure out at what point can we go in and go back to the labs, even if it requires limiting the number of people who can be in a lab and changing the protocols. But overall, the research continues, and we'll. So I had another comment, but I'll let you see if you have any more questions, Renee.
I think we've covered the bulk of the topics. Now, again, we may not have gotten to every individual question, but we've gotten to each of the main topics that have been asked. So if you'd like to wrap it up with some closing remarks, that would be a good time to do that.
Well, I will end where we started, which is by thanking all of you, thanking our students, thanking our families. I mean, the student families. I know moving out of campus, as I mentioned, was as stressful for families as it was for students. I really appreciate, especially those of you from other states and even from other countries. I know that was even harder for you to handle all that logistics. So I want to express my appreciation. I want to express my appreciation for the students who have somehow managed to make this transition to online, which is something none of us had predicted. And just to see how each one of you has found a solution and somehow has found a way to continuing with the learning. Really, it's phenomenal. It is incredible. This overnight transformation of the whole operation of the institute has been nothing short of amazing. And I want to thank all of you. We have done this together. And just moving forward, just to maybe a reminder, as you know, during the last 6 months, we've been working on this new strategic plan, and a very important part of that plan was to clarify what our mission was, and to synthesize that to a simple statement that captured the spirit of Georgia Tech. And that statement, as you know, and it is available in the documents on the website, it says, "We develop leaders who advance technology and improve the human condition." And every time I look at that statement, especially in the last few weeks, it reminds me of absolutely how essential it is that we continue to do what we're doing. And that each one of you, through your own learning, you're preparing yourself not just to be successful professionally, not just to contribute to your communities, but to be leaders who are going to be able to make a difference. This is a very complex situation. No one had ever dealt with something this difficult. But there may be other challenges that come our way, and I feel like with the investment that we're making, each of us in learning, I think we're going to be in good shape. The world needs more people like you, and I'm really proud to be part of this community. So thank you all. Thank you, Renee, and your team for setting this up, and go Jackets.
Thank you, President Cabrera. As I said, we will post this once it's processed in the next day to 2 days, and we will try to answer all the questions online if we did not get to individual questions here. Thank you again for attending. There will be another session at 8 p.m. tonight for students and parents. So tell your friends, and we'll be here ready to answer their questions. Have a great day.